All episodes of Dune Prophecy are now streaming on Max or wherever you get your HBO shows. The final episode of season 1 just aired earlier tonight or today morning. Time difference is weird, man. But anyway, I just got done watching it. I actually did a whole binge of it starting yesterday after I finished reading Sisterhood of Dune. So I'm actually doing my homework as I'm watching the show. And there are going to be some spoilers in this video. You have been warned. I want to talk a lot about some of the things that happen in this. So without further ado, let's get into it. About 10,148 years before the birth of Paul Atreides, we follow the Sisterhood, the Bene Gesserit, as they are becoming the characters that we know them as. And this is currently being headed by Mother Superior Valia Harkonnen, played by Emily Watson, as well as her sister Tula Harkonnen, played by Olivia Williams. However, when there seems to be some conspiracies afoot when it comes to the Emperor Corrino, played by Mark Strong, and some things that are going on in his court, eventually the Sisterhood's plans on how to manipulate certain socio-political proceedings become a little more contrived and a little more complicated, and that results in the entire story of the show playing out as it does. This is, of course, like I said, already based on Sisterhood of Dune, and that is what they gave for homework material when it came to this show. They said, read the book and you'll know. This is written by Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson. This is not by Frank Herbert. He wrote just 6 books originally for Dune, and then Brian has gone on to do a lot more in terms of prequels and spin-offs to really build the world of Dune. This has had some reactions from, most fans of Dune. Some people like some of the decisions that have been made, some do not. And so going into Dune Prophecy, there was a lot of debate as to how many of those decisions were going to carry forward and how many of those were going to be abandoned. Some of the more controversial things definitely still do play in here at times, especially when it comes to the idea of the Butlerian Jihad and everything that happened when it came to fighting the thinking machines, in that it is an actual fight. There is something about the ideology of what Frank Herbert did when it came to, abandoning the, course of technology over time that is somewhat turned into a more Terminator style thing when it comes to the Dune universe now, which I can understand as a very polarizing thing. And it's also something that in the book, when I was reading it, it is something that they constantly debate as to whether or not it's a good idea. But it's also one of those things that I feel like it takes away from some of the more subtleties and nuances of the themes surrounding that idea when it comes to the Dune universe. It doesn't play out exactly like the book, though. This is somewhat of a sequel to the books, so I believe the Great Schools of Dune trilogy, it takes place after that. But you get a lot of different moments where you go back to the events of Sisterhood of Dune, which have been altered, and there are some things that they have switched around when it comes to how character arcs unfold and when it comes to characters doing things that parallel other things that happen in the book. And so in that sense, they've tried to sprinkle in as much of that as possible, especially when it comes to the motivation surrounding Valia Harkonnen. Right out the gate, I will say that they did a very good job with the characters over here, especially when it comes to Emily Watson and Olivia Williams' performances. They both are really solid in the show, and their work that they're doing eventually, trying to move everything behind the scenes according to how they see things should play out, based on the simulations that they may have seen or the predicted, analysis that comes through from the thinking computers. Some of that stuff does come through very effectively. And there is an idea that is throughout these 6 episodes of, how they're sort of seeping their way into all of these important, decision-making processes and, sort of paving the way forward for how they need things to play out. And I think the show did a very good job over there. When it came to that aspect of the show, I think it succeeds the most. I also think it does a very good job of some of the stuff going on with Emperor Corrino and the power plays that are taking place in his court. Some of the stuff that's going on over there also was very intriguing, and I liked some of the moments there, especially with Mark Strong. I thought he was very good as well, and there are aspects of him that do take from the Emperor in the book, which I believe is his predecessor, in that there is a similar sense of weakness to both of them, and they both are trying to appear stronger than they are and often need counsel in order to be able to go forward. There are some things, however, that are, added upon over here, especially when it comes to the character of Desmond Hart, played by Travis Fimmel. Now, as the show progresses, the stuff that's going on with Desmond is very interesting. He has this ability to make people literally internally combust and, burn apart. And something that is happening throughout the show is that certain targets are being chosen in order to do this. And for a long time, you're sort of wondering what's going on. And his explanation is it's a power that he's been granted by Shai Hulud. And when you watch the show, again, there are certain moments that, eventually do reveal how he got that power. Although I feel like sometimes his character is a bit one note. There are aspects to him that do come up as a larger story and things that have happened with him that have led to this moment, particularly when it comes to him getting the powers. But I don't feel like we get enough time to go into that, which is funny because the show, each episode is an hour at least. The finale that just aired is an hour and 20 minutes long. These are big episodes. And there's a lot happening in them, especially when it comes to, turning the cogs, when it comes to, making things work out in the Sisterhood's favors. But at the same time, I just feel like some things do get, pulled to the side. Another thing that doesn't really get a chance to shine as much in the process is the stuff that's surrounding the other members of the court and other things happening on Salusa Secundus, especially when it comes to this rebellion that seems to be forming against the Emperor and trying to, break apart the power dynamics that are in play. Some of the stuff going on with Kieran Atreides and Princess Yanez was interesting. I mean, there is a love story between them that does blossom, and there are aspects to that they do develop for a while, but it is something that is to the side pretty often after a while because you're more focused on everything that's going on with the Sisterhood and everything that's happening with, the Emperor and Desmond Hart. And that stuff is interesting. The most interesting aspect of the entire series for me so far was the stuff that's going on with the past of the Sisterhood. You follow a lot of things that have led to the moment that they're in and all the decisions that Valia and Tula have made along the way in order to establish the power that they have, which involves killing a lot of people who are not on their side and using the voice to make them do things which are, truly terrible. But this is particularly to Valia. Some of those moments I thought were very good, and again, they're the ones that were most interesting, especially when it comes to some of the acolytes who are coming in to the school, and they're eventually, learning the ways of becoming a part of the Sisterhood. But then at one point of time, in the process of trying to become a Reverend Mother, one of these students, Lila, she goes through a very major arc where she dies and then comes back, but she has the voices of all the mothers in her now, and she's able to see a lot of different things and also realize some of the frauds that are taking place when it comes to the Sisterhood's decisions. That stuff is also really, really good. I like that. The one thing that I would like a little bit more of, and they do that much more towards the end of the season, is some of the stuff going on with the other sisters who are introduced along the way, like Kasha and Francesca, especially Francesca, because she has a major role to play in everything that plays out at the Emperor's court. Tabu, the very famous Bollywood actress who I've seen since I was a kid in movies, it was pretty cool seeing her in this, and she's very good in the show, but she appears much later into the season. And I would have liked to have seen her a little bit before that because her storyline revolving around sort of moving places around when it comes to how the Emperor needs to act and, who needs to be placed in power eventually. Those things play out in a very fascinating way. I thought that was very interesting, and I would have liked a little bit more of that. The structure is all over the place. It does feel like it goes back and forth quite a bit, and it can lose focus quite often. That's something that I feel like you're beginning to gather from what I've been saying so far as well. There are times where it will go sort of back and forth in terms of timelines and in terms of plot lines as well. Some things getting skewed to the side, like I said. And it just creates this very jumbled experience at times, especially the first couple of episodes. I was all over the place when it came to that. But that's also kind of similar to the book Sisterhood of Dune, which is that, it takes a while to really start connecting the pieces together. Some of the interesting stuff that happens in that book I would have liked to see a little bit more of. Like, you get these little conversations about Griffin Harkonnen, Valia's brother, and if you read the book, you know his fate. And there are parts of his storyline that are brought up, especially when it comes to Vorian Atreides, that I would have liked to have seen in the show. But that's not something that I levy against the show as a negative. That's just a personal thing where that storyline was a little interesting that could have gone somewhere. But then season 2 is coming, so who knows, maybe season 2 will deal with some of that. I am curious also because the show has said it's a sequel through the trilogy of books, so I'm assuming I have to read Mentats and Navigators of Dune as well to, really see the full picture of things. I think this case, the book really helped because there were just some things that, especially for characters, you would have got a little bit more out of if you've, read some of the stuff over there. My favorite episode easily as a result is probably episode 3 because you get the most amount of character development with Valia and Tula over here, especially the younger versions of them and everything that transpires and leads to the decisions that they make down the line. That stuff was very, very good. And again, that is a strong point for it. Much like the movies that have come out so far, the visual effects are pretty spectacular. It looks very, very good. There's some really great, landscapes and environments that are created that do look pretty great. It's interesting to see things like Salusa Secundus in its prime, because by the time you get to Denis Villeneuve's movies, it's this cold wasteland with the Serdukar who are over there just, running things like it's a cult planet. This very disturbing imagery that you get. But the Harkonnens have got a foothold over there now that they don't currently have. And so to see some of those things, before that time is interesting. It's also interesting when you hear about certain things to come that haven't happened yet, and certain, other parallels that they make. You constantly keep hearing about the effects of, witnessing Shai Hulud in all his glory, and, you see the sandworms pretty often in these visions, very much looking like the ones which you saw in the movies, which is just tying into the fact that this is canon to Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2 and the soon-to-be, Dune Messiah as well. There is some good stuff that does come out of the vision sequences, though, like, everything that you're seeing with Shai Hulud. Like, there is this terrifying nature to it that is showcased in this one really great scene in episode 4 where Tula asks the other acolytes to draw the nightmares that they're having, this collective dream. And as they're drawing it, they get more and more scared and they start to fear what's going on, and eventually they can't stop drawing these things that they're seeing. Eventually you do get some idea as to what that is, and there is something about the thinking machines that is playing into it. Although I'm curious as to, again, how that'll develop into the future story, especially because there is an idea of the reckoning that they talk about that, eventually you could see it for what it is. In some ways it could be that, in some ways it could be Paul Atreides, it could be the God Emperor. Who knows? I don't know. Well, I guess we'll have to see to find out how that plays out. But going back to Desmond Hart for a second, something that's interesting about him is that he is part Harkonnen and part Atreides. This is a big reveal that happens towards the end of the season where you find out that he is the son of Tula Harkonnen and Ori Atreides. And Tula killed Ori and his entire Atreides cohort, in this act of revenge after what the Atreides had done to Abelard Harkonnen in the past, which is, again, something that comes up in the book, and they reference that at one point. But all of that stuff, is interesting. Again, just want a little bit more time with it. And they do seem to hint that there is a lot more to come with that storyline. So I'm, hoping that does happen in season 2. I am curious to see how all of that is going to play out as well. By the end of Dune Prophecy, though, I thought it was a decent watch. I didn't think it was as good as the other 2 movies that have just come out. Not even close. It doesn't quite get there, but I will say it's not as good as it can be either. It's very uneven at times. There are some really good things, and there are some positives, especially in the latter half of the season. But that first half can be very scattered and uneven, and I wish there was some more time to, make some things land. The performances are really good. The visuals are great. There's some decent action also. There's not a ton of action, but there's some decent stuff. There's some great socio-political intrigue that's playing into things. But overall, there are aspects that could have been developed a lot more and a few things that could have landed a lot better. But I am curious to see how season 2 is going to play out. There could be something over there too. I'm going to give Dune Prophecy Season 1 a B. Like I said, I know that there are some things that people are not fully on board with, so I completely understand if some things are not, going to work for others. But I am curious to hear what those thoughts are going to be, going forward. And so I'm looking forward to those conversations. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Look forward to more videos very, very soon. As always, if you like this, guys, please do subscribe. Thank you very much once again, and enjoy the show.